Let the countdown begin. November 21st, Qatar 2022, the World Cup. It is coming faster than you would expect. Welcome on into the AT&T 5G virtual studios, and welcome to Club and Country Qatar 2022. It's the inaugural journey here with us. I'm Andrew Wiebe. I'm with Charlie Davies, Matt Doyle, David Goss. We will be with you every single month to break down the biggest stories, the most salacious quotes, and everything you need to know about the U.S. men's national team and Canadian men's national team ahead of the 2022 World Cup. On today's show, we are going through the current state of the teams after June camps, some that went pretty well in the U.S.'s sense and some with some big questions to be answered for the Canadians. We'll go through our big depth chart questions for the U.S. as well as Matt Doyle's 26-man and cut it down to 23-man just in case roster for Greg Berhalter. We will hit what Greg Berhalter said, and we'll get out of here and look ahead to the rest of the year as we prepare for Qatar. And, of course, we will go into the transfer situations for both teams. The window in Europe opens on July 1st. A lot of interesting situations there. But first, let's start with the U.S., Charlie. Big window for them. You see 4 games here. A win against Morocco. They're bound for the World Cup. 3-0. A great performance there. 0-0 against Uruguay. You like the defensive side. Shanjan was a standout, but no goal to be had. 5-0 against Grenada. It was the Jesus Ferreira game. He needed goals. He got 4 of them in El Salvador. In the mud, a 1-1. Give me your big picture thoughts here, man. What was this like for the U.S.? Where do they stand?
Big picture, we have a foundation. There's a mission, there's the tactics, there's an identity. I would say overall, we have to be pleased with where they are right now. Now, it's a work in progress still. We're still trying to figure out who the number 9 is and who the number 2 center back is and who's going to be the goalkeeper come Qatar, because you got to go with form. But I'd say in all that this is a very promising side, and one player in particular that I'm really excited about that gives this U.S. team a different dynamic, because the engine is the midfield. That's the strongest part of our team, is Yunus Musah. I love that over the course of these last 2 games that we've seen him develop more in the attacking third. And I think that's where his game needed to improve the most to get this team to where they can compete and get out of a World Cup group. Yunus Musah is the key to this team. And I think we're starting to see him take on that objective, that mission to help this team go forward.
Just 180 minutes left for Greg Berhalter to prepare. In September, 2 friendlies in Europe against Asian teams that have qualified for the World Cup. We'll find out who those teams are soon, but we do know who the group is for the U.S. in Qatar. They start with Wales. Gareth Bale, big match there, big opportunity for the U.S. Saw some odds, let's say, recently that had Wales as a better chance to get out of the group than the U.S. I don't think the Americans will agree with that. England up next. Losers to Hungary. How much do you read into the Nations League? TBD on that one. Even my aunt is hitting me up saying that they are vulnerable. And we finish with Iran. So that is the group for the U.S. The flip side, Canada are back in the World Cup. Dave, it's been a long time. The opportunity is massive, and it was a mixed bag in this June window for them. There was an Iran friendly. It was canceled. There was a Panama friendly. The players struck as they had issues with the CSA. They did beat Curacao 4-0 in their Nations League opener, and then they went to Honduras, and in disappointing fashion and perhaps disappointing conditions for the Canadians, lost 2-1 to the Catrachos. What was this June window about, and what's the state of the Canadian men's national team?
The state of Canadian men's national team is 2 different sides. I think you saw again in this window that on the field, the players are ready to compete at this level. You saw a team with Alphonso Davies back in for the first time in 2022, playing at home in Vancouver for the first time since he left the Whitecaps for Bayern Munich. He has the hearts and minds of this country. He is the player that can lead them along the way. They are a team on the field that is ready to compete at the World Cup, even in a tough group, even playing against some of the best teams in the world, a World Cup finalist in Croatia, Belgium, obviously, and Morocco. But off the field, this is a program that is not at the level of their players, and we've seen it on the women's side for years now, and you see it here with the men. You mentioned the issues around the Iran game, the lack of coordination, lack of ability to schedule that friendly properly, and then bringing Panama in last minute, and the players then striking because of a ton of conditions off the field, whether it was about their contracts, their travel, the way their families are going to be treated in Qatar as they try and, push for a World Cup, push through the World Cup out of the group stage. All of that is unknown, and that's the worst thing you want for a team going into a World Cup. At the same time, you saw them rally and dominate Curacao. You saw them rally in the second half in miserable conditions down in Honduras to at least cut the lead. And you've heard John Herdman still have, I think, a pulse on this group. So while there's a ton of negative off the field and a ton of issues that need to be dealt with, you still come out of this window and say, this is a fun, dark horse team that is ready as a unit to compete at a World Cup.
Still the team that finished atop the octagonal. The team that surprised the world, certainly surprised CONCACAF. Their opportunity is historic in Qatar. Their group, very, very difficult. They start with Belgium on November 23rd. It's Croatia on the 27th, as you said, Dave. Then it's Morocco on December 1st. You figure that match, if they can get a result, maybe even two to start, is going to be the one that decides whether they go on to the knockout round. All right, a couple months until Greg Berhalter and John Herdman have to turn in their rosters. We'll talk about Greg Berhalter's 26-man as well as the depth chart questions for the U.S. in just a second. Before all that happens, before the friendlies in September, we have the transfer window. Fates to be decided. July 1st, it opens up in Europe, and it's going to get crazy for both the U.S. and Canada. Let's start with the U.S. side and the situations to watch. The most high-profile, Brendan Aronson. We know how that was resolved. $30 million to Leeds United. The move that had been rumored for more than 6 months came to fruition. Jesse Marsch keeping Leeds in the Premier League, and Brendan Aronson following a big role for him. We'll talk about that more in just a second. Christian Pulisic, what's his future at Chelsea? New owners? Same club? TBD. We will find out. Tyler Adams could be moving on from RB Leipzig, looking for more playing time as his role was lessened over the course of last season. And Chris Richards is perhaps back to Bayern, perhaps back on loan, or perhaps sold to a team where he can get some starting minutes. Let's go through player by player here, and Dave, I'll start with you. Brendan Aronson, this is the done deal. $30 million, a huge price tag for the former Philadelphia Union homegrown. What is the change in scenery going to be like for him? What's he got to prove at Leeds to be in prime form ahead of the World Cup?
Brendan Aronson, I think, is in one of those rare positions where he has the ability with his club play to earn a spot in the starting lineup with the U.S. men's national team. It feels like a lot of the squad is set in pen. He is one of those players that everyone is saying he has to start, but no one knows where. And if he can play as a number 10 centrally week in and week out in the Premier League and put up numbers and be goal dangerous and be creative, that can change the calculus for Greg Berhalter. He's obviously going to do it somewhat comfortably under Jesse Marsch, a guy he's worked for already. He's obviously going to do it in a system that fits him really well and may fit perfectly for the way Greg Berhalter is starting to shift this team. And so Brendan Aronson has the ability to earn a starting spot at this World Cup. He also has the ability to make history as a go-to attacking player in the Premier League, which an American hasn't really been ever able to say.
Doyle, I got to ask you, though. There are going to be challenges for him. What are the biggest challenges for Aronson in the Premier League?
The physicality. The speed of the game and the physicality of the game in the Premier League is just night and day from what he'll have ever seen both in MLS and in Austria. Now, he got a taste of like the high-level stuff while playing for RB Salzburg in the Champions League itself, but like there's a difference between having that type of game once a month for over a course of 3 or 4 months versus having that every single weekend. And Aronson's a really good player. He's a really smart player. He recognizes transition opportunities well, which is why he's a $30 million player. He's not super physical. So that is going to be by far the biggest challenge for Brendan Aronson this season and seasons to come.
Big price tag, big expectations, working with Jesse Marsch. That's a good thing for Brendan Aronson, whose career is skyrocketing. Christian Pulisic's career has skyrocketed, but it seems to be coming down to earth a little bit with Chelsea. Got to take a closer look at that one. New ownership, American ownership, that could change the game for Pulisic there, but a lot of games, a lot of goals, a lot of impact under Frank Lampard. Less so under Thomas Tuchel, and it seemed like there was a little bit of frustration in the Pulisic camp as it came to that. You saw some quotes from his dad recently about whether or not his future lies in London. He says he likes London. He's committed to the club. All the public talk.
You gotta get dad off social media. You gotta get dad off social media.
As a dad, I couldn't resist either. But we know the talent. We know the upside. Does Tuchel rate Pulisic in a way that gives him the playing time, the starting role, the impact role, the ideal positional role? Maybe not, maybe, that Christian needs to prepare for the World Cup. This is one to watch. What will the ownership group, the new one, what role will they play? TBD, but if the U.S. want to go far in the World Cup, they need Christian Pulisic in the best possible club situation. So this is going to be one we are watching all summer long. Sergiño Dest, Charlie, is one we might watch, but it seems like he wants to stay in Barcelona. There are mixed signals as to whether Barcelona wants to keep him. What do you think might happen?
Well, I think it's a great situation for Sergiño Dest to stay in because you're at one of the best clubs in the world. A lot of people argue that's the biggest club in the world. Real Madrid, Manchester United, Barcelona. I mean, for him playing under Xavi, this is a new direction for the club. There were talks about him not being part of the plans, but it seems to me that he plays his way into the team every single time. And so Xavi's testing him, and he's reacting to it in a positive manner. And it comes down to him learning how to defend, because we all know how gifted he is dribbling, getting into the attacking third as a right back. But your main objective is to defend. And I think with Xavi, he's learning how to do that and the right positions to take tactically. So that will essentially help him with the U.S. men's national team, especially in a World Cup. So I think his best case scenario is staying at Barcelona and earning the playing time and staying and really developing as a true elite right back on the global scene.
If he was to leave, it would be to a massive club, Bayern Munich, one of those. Rumored Bayern Munich, also the club of Chris Richards, Doyle, who we didn't see in this June window for the USMNT. But there's a belief that he might be the number 2 center back next to Walker Zimmerman. He has a decision to make, or Bayern does, probably more accurately. What does Richards need from this window?
He needs playing time, and I think he needs a long-term home. He's not going to end up being a regular for Bayern Munich. I think if he was going to make that sort of leap, we would have seen it already. But he was very good on loan with Hoffenheim last year in the Bundesliga. Clearly a starting caliber center back in the Bundesliga. There's interest also in the Premier League. I think Southampton, Crystal Palace, which I would love because still a Patrick Vieira guy at heart. One of those teams, I would love to see him make a permanent move. And remember, before he got injured, he was starting to take starts away from Miles Robinson and Walker Zimmerman. Like, it wasn't clear that it was going to be Zimmerman and Robinson. Richards was right in there. So I think if he gets a move and is getting regular minutes, then you write him in to the roster in pen, and he is the odds-on favorite, I think, to be number 2 on that center back depth chart behind Walker Zimmerman.
His career sort of in the balance right now. Does Bayern want to keep him? Do they think he can get some minutes there?
Career in the balance is a little dramatic.
Okay, it's not, I'm just saying.
He's at Bayern Munich.
I'm not saying it's going to go into the dumpster here. I'm just saying there's a big decision that will guide the rest of his career. All right. Okay. Look, the flip side is Tyler Adams may or may not have a decision. Charlie, do you think he does? Do you think he leaves RB Leipzig? Does he stick around?
I don't think he leaves RB Leipzig because he didn't have the best year. You know, you look at his previous season in 2021 where he played 27 games, had a goal and assist, 1,800 minutes. Last year, you know, I felt like he's overcome the injury bug, but he's battling 2 other players. And Konrad Laimer from Austria, he was the one who had 4 goals and 4 assists, was getting a lot of the plaudits in midfield. Then he was kind of supplanted by Kevin Campbell. That's a 31-year-old Slovenian international, but I would say he doesn't cover as much ground as Tyler and gives you something different. So Tyler this year, I think, needs to earn that spot again and then have a standout year. It's a World Cup year, and then you can be sold. His contract is 2025, so it's not that they have to move him now. So I don't see him moving, and I see him trying to fight his way back onto the starting 11. I think he should be able to do that. So, there's 2 guys, and then Amadou Haidara, who also had an MCL injury last year. I think Tyler Adams is going to start to see playing time and have his stock rise.
Big 6 months for Tyler Adams to get back in the team, get in form ahead of the World Cup. Big 6 months for Zach Steffen as well. What will he do? There were some rumblings that he might try to go out on loan. Recent rumblings say he's probably sticking at Manchester City. We know Matt Turner, also a backup. We'll go into our goalkeeper depth chart here in just a little bit. But Steffen, one to keep an eye on. And Luca De La Torre, one that seems almost certain to move. We're hearing rumblings that maybe Belgium is the destination. You saw Ronny Deila from NYCFC go to Standard Liège. Maybe Luca De La Torre follows him, but Hercules was relegated despite the fact that Luca De La Torre was a huge part of their team. He seems to be in line for a move here. Let's take a closer look at Canada. Kyle Larin, he's a free agent. How does that happen? A lot of teams reaching out to him, including ones in Greece. Olympiacos, maybe Nottingham Forest, maybe an MLS side. Jonathan David, what's his future? Will Lille hold on to him? Steven Vittoria, relegated, needs a place to play ahead of the World Cup. And Richie Larea, what's his role with Nottingham Forest as well after some spot minutes toward the end of the year, but bigger role at the end as they fought for promotion to the Premier League. Let's start with Kyle Larin, Doyle. Where would you like to see him go? Where do you think he will go?
Well, the latest rumors are Nottingham Forest, who just won promotion to the Premier League, and that does make sense since Dane Murphy, who's kind of their sporting director there, he's American. He's very familiar with guys from MLS. He's very familiar with the scene here. I'm sure he's very familiar with Kyle Larin. I think Kyle Larin would be a good fit in the Premier League. And generally speaking, when Premier League teams come calling, that's where players end up. So I think that's probably where the smart money is. But if there actually is no Premier League interest and it just becomes a bidding war between Olympiacos and whoever, I would love to see the New England Revolution get involved. Like, they are sitting on a pile of money after the sales they've made, Matt Turner, Tejan Buchanan, and Adam Buxa. And look, like, if it's a free player, you could give him a nice fat contract, and Kyle Larin would instantly be one of the two best center forwards in this league. So I would just hope an MLS team gets involved, but the smart money is on someplace in the Premiership.
We'll talk more about Nottingham Forest in just a second. Kyle Larin, one to watch, the leading goal scorer in World Cup qualification out of CONCACAF. How about Jonathan David, though, Charlie? He's sort of the shining light up top, it seems, at times for Canada. Lille, staying or going? That's been the question for a while now for David.
I guess the trouble with moving Jonathan David is the fact that his contract doesn't expire until 2025. And so to pry him away right now, you'd have to be throwing a big deal at him and the club to pry him away. And so you would hope he would move. I mean, he's shown consistent goal scoring over the past two seasons, 13 goals last year, this year, 15 goals. So heading into 2022 in a World Cup year, you want to make sure that you're moving in the right direction. And I think big clubs have been circling, but no one's really been like, here's the bank. I would expect him to move this summer because it feels like Lille is a big selling club. They like to develop talent and sell them on. They're not really interested in holding on to talent into their prime. So I could see him making the move, and I know he wants to play at a bigger club in Champions League. So it'd be great for Canada, but again, it's got to be the right situation.
A lot of moving pieces here. Steven Vittoria figuring that out, Dave. He's got to find a club.
Yeah, Morente relegated for him, so he's available to move. It doesn't feel like any of the three Canadian MLS teams, that's a position of need that he could fill. So you'd assume he stays in Europe. He just came from Poland. So you'd think a league like that would make sense for him. But at 35 years old, he needs to be playing games. He needs to be fit and limber and ready to run after Romelu Lukaku and Kevin De Bruyne on day one of the World Cup. So for him, it's about minutes more than league. It's about team fit and style more than the biggest, highest profile club.
Got to stay limber. We all do as you get older. Got to watch out. Richie Larea, though, he's the last on our list here on the Canadian side as far as transfers go. Didn't get the playing time maybe he wanted, was behind Jed Spence, though, at Nottingham Forest, who played 41 league games for them and is the subject of a Tottenham rumor and has a £15 million price tag placed on him from Middlesbrough, where he was loaned out to Forest. So if he sticks around, it's going to be tough for Richie Larea to get on the field. But if he moves on, there's an opening for Larea at Nottingham Forest. Can he take advantage of it? Does he need to move on? Does the club see him in their plans? You'd have to ask the manager that. But he's one to keep an eye on this summer. Currently, no big rumors around him. But there could be some moves. The U.S. and Canada. Agents busy, players busy, clubs busy. The European transfer window opening July 1st. Keep an eye on all these players to see what happens. Positional battles, they're going to last all the way up to the opening games and throughout the World Cup as well. We're taking a closer look at the United States men's national team's big three positional battles on this show. And at the very, very end, stick around. You're going to get Matt Doyle's 26-man roster seen through the eyes of Greg Berhalter with some wishful thinking, perhaps.
Matt, congratulations on your spot on the U.S. men's national team coaching staff.
Thank you.
Who are you supplanting? We'll discuss that in just a little bit. Let's start with the number 9 position. Where else? Jesus Ferreira has split opinion, but there's no doubt that he creates scoring opportunities for himself and others. The question is, will he finish his? Got 4 against Grenada, Doyle. What did he prove to you in this window, and what does your current number 9 depth chart look like?
He finds chances. It's what you said, Wiebe. He's very good at finding chances for himself, and I think the team as a whole finds more chances when he's on the field. His movement in possession play in those scripted moments, so clever, so good, so on point. He's also turned into just a better athlete than he was even a year ago. He's grown into his body a little bit more, and that's why he's consistently in those spots to sometimes miss sitters. But finding those in the first place, that's the hardest thing. He does that consistently. I have him number 1. Behind him, it's a mess. And we all know it's a mess. I've been really impressed with Brandon Vasquez from what he's done so far with FC Cincinnati. He's a big, strong, traditional target forward who finds a ton of chances, a lot of them good quality. He also can hold the ball up. He wins everything in the air. So just a different dimension. And then third on the depth chart, I have Ricardo Pepi. He hasn't played well for almost a year now. But I think after having a summer under his belt, a full preseason under his belt with Augsburg, he's a super talented player, just a natural goal scorer. So the way I see it, you have in Ferreira a false 9, in Vasquez a target forward, and in Pepi you've got a poacher. So you cover all your bases with the center forward depth chart.
So, Charlie, you might raise your eyebrows there at Brandon Vasquez, and many of those watching or listening will as well. Maybe he gets called into this September friendly camp. You know, Haji Wright didn't exactly show the very best that he could, and you heard that from Greg Berhalter. How does your depth chart compare? Do you think Brandon Vasquez legitimately has a shot to get into this team?
Yes, I do think he has a legitimate shot. But I would also argue that Daryl Dike, Josh Sargent, Jordan Pefok, given he does make a move to another league, Bundesliga or Liga, and continues to have the same production he did in the Swiss league, and Haji Wright. So I'd say it's a battle. All of those players, those 5 players, you might even throw Matthew Hoppe in there, are all competing for that third striker spot. I'd say Jesus Ferreira and Ricardo Pepi are locks for me. Those 2 are locks. And Ricardo Pepi is a lock simply because of Greg Berhalter knows what he can get from him and out of him. And he's just in a bad run of form right now. He has 0 confidence. He isn't playing. And I think he has enough time to turn it around from now till the World Cup camp, not even the roster selection to the camp. And in doing so, he's going to be back in the picture. So I'd say it's those 2. And then you always throw in, I know we haven't seen it and we probably won't see it, but Timo Weah is a great option at the 9 position. And so the fact that he could play there maybe doesn't make it so important that they go out and find that third player if no one steps up to the plate. If no one grabs that opportunity, if no one is playing consistently and scoring goals, then Greg Berhalter might say, you know what? I have my 2 guys. Timo Weah can be that third player. Maybe I go to a false 9 and Christian could be there, or play 2 strikers, whatever it is, and I'm going to use that roster spot for another spot in the field.
Somebody's got to get in form. We need our Hurt Gomez, man. We need our Edson Buttle. Who is it going to be? Who's going to seize that opportunity?
We got that, man. Like, Haji Wright was that in Turkey. He got his chance. He didn't perform. Jordy Pefok he won the Golden Boot in Switzerland. He didn't perform. Now we have guys in MLS who are performing. In Jesus Ferreira, Brandon Vasquez, and Jeremy Abobasi. Berhalter's been willing to look at anybody. And that's why I think guys like Vasquez and Abobasi are like, look, Berhalter name-checked Vasquez for a reason, man. If he keeps playing like this, given how well-rounded he is, I think we're going to see him in September. He's going to get a chance to win this job.
And Doyle, that's what I would say. That's what I would say. They have to do it for the whole season, and
Absolutely.
I think it's much harder for Abobasi and Vasquez to keep this form throughout the whole season. But if they do, they're worthy of a call-up.
Wow, disrespecting that FC Cincinnati attack. How dare you, Charlie?
Not right. Go listen to the interview with Brandon Vasquez we did on Extra Time. He said he spoke to Greg when they were in camp, the U.S. and Cincinnati. He wants to get in the team. He knows all these guys from youth national team. He's hungry for it. We'll see if he gets the opportunity in September. How about that center back depth chart, Doyle? How's it look to you right now?
Walker Zimmerman, number 1 in pen. As long as he's healthy, he's there, maybe even wearing the captain's armband. I have Chris Richards, number 2. And I know we really haven't seen him play since the winter because of the injuries he took, but he's a really good player. He's not quite as athletic as either Aaron Long or Cameron Carter-Vickers, who I have at 3 and 4 on the depth chart, but he's a better distributor. He reads the game well. He has that high-level experience in the Bundesliga. He's also partnered Walker Zimmerman a couple times, so it's not like he would be coming in cold. So I have those guys 1, 2, 3, 4: Zimmerman, Richards, Long, and Carter-Vickers. And then I'm actually planning to bring a fifth center back if it expands to 26. And that fifth center back is going to be a guy who can also fill in at defensive midfield and at right back. And so to me, it comes down to James Sands or Eric Palmer-Brown, but it's got to be Sands. He was best 11 caliber D-mid for the MLS Cup champions last year, won a trophy. He started in center back at both a back 5 and a back 4 for the U.S. as they won the Gold Cup last year. And he played at right back for Rangers in the Europa League final and then won the Scottish Cup playing at that position. So he's played at a high level at all 3 of those positions. Once you get down to roster slots 24, 25, 26, you want to take guys who have experience winning and who have experience and add depth to you for you at multiple spots.
I'll just throw in one name, and that would be Mark McKenzie. I'd say in terms of that final.
He's got a chance.
Fifth center back.
He's got a chance for sure.
Eric Palmer-Brown, difficult camp for him, injured, didn't perform maybe as he would have liked, so less opportunities for him. We did not mention Cameron Carter-Vickers in the transfer segment, but he sealed his permanent move to Celtic, so that was a big deal for Cameron Carter-Vickers to find a permanent spot where he can thrive. We'll see what happens with Sands in the SPL as well. Let's hit the goalkeepers, Doyle, because this is a point of contention. Let's say, how much does playing time matter? How much does club situation matter? And who would be the third goalkeeper? Many are competing, but just one can go.
To me, playing time matters a lot, but one thing Greg Berhalter has shown us all is that playing time with the club does not matter to him in terms of who his first choice goalkeeper is. So based upon that, it still feels like a toss-up between Matt Turner and Zach Steffen, with I think Sean Johnson is probably number 3 now, ahead of Ethan Horvath after what happened in this camp. If it was me, I would still go Turner number 1. His shot stopping is just miles beyond what Steffen has been able to do. And look, man, Zach Steffen's a talented kid. He has not been the same since he has gone to the bench with Man City. He's been so error-prone for both club and country. We saw, of course, in that disastrous qualifier at Costa Rica. We saw it even against Panama in the one where the U.S. clinched. We've seen it in the FA Cup semifinals a couple years in a row with Man City. I feel like he should have played himself out of the job at this point. I don't know if he has. I know that if I was making the decision, though, it would be Matt Turner.
We don't know what the decision will be. Zach Steffen not in the camp here for the U.S. That changes the equation a little bit. Didn't get to see him against Morocco or against Uruguay, of course, Grenada or El Salvador as well. We will wait and see all the way into September. That may be the final chance for Greg to get a run out to these guys and maybe give us a little bit of sign who will be starting between the posts for the U.S. in Qatar in their opener against Wales. Let's get that 26-man roster on the screen, Doyle. We've got a couple different positional breakdowns, but I need to see the full picture here. IFAB coming out, and at least the rumors are that we're going to 26. That is a positive thing, obviously, for guys on the fringe. I think for the quality of games as well. Walk us through your 26 that we're looking at right now. How'd you think about this? What were the big decisions?
I think, Charlie was saying that he thinks there's about 21 names that are must-haves, and I think that's about right. And I think we all know, for the most part, who those guys are. The big decisions are the number 9 situation, right? We can all make our cases for guys who are in the mix beyond Jesus Ferreira. It's obvious Jesus Ferreira is going to be there, whether he's starting or not, he's going to be on this team. But the rest of it is just, throw the pieces up in the air and see where they land. Back up, right back. I think it's going to be DeAndre Yedlin because he would literally be the only player on this roster with World Cup experience. And Greg Berhalter has preferred him over Reggie Cannon or Shaq Moore in games against better competition. So I think Yedlin probably has the edge there, though Cannon's versatility is that works in his advantage. And then left back, I have Kevin Paredes there, and I'll straight up admit that's me wish casting. I have no idea if he's even going to play for Wolfsburg coming out of this coming out of preseason. But I think he's just such a talented kid. And to me, it's so important for this team to have a like-for-like backup for Anthony Robinson. Because if you don't have a left back who creates width and penetration, it makes it so much harder to get the ball onto the foot of those pocket wingers. And the pocket winger on the left-hand side is Christian Pulisic. You want him with the ball on his foot in those spaces. And so hopefully Jedi plays every single minute in Qatar, but you can't bank on that. So I think one of the things that Berhalter has to figure out is who can back him up at left back and do a similar job just in case the worst happens.
Listen, Doyle, I appreciate you having wishes and hopes. I appreciate that you are still young and you've still got dust in your eyes. And listen,
Oh my gosh.
from the starters and I think through the middle of that roster, I agree with you. The eyebrow raisers are the bottom half of this roster, are the bubble guys. And I think Charlie already stated Brendan Vasquez as a center forward is interesting, and I don't know that anyone else feels that he's locked in here. And then James Sands and Paredes are the other two big ones. And I understand your argument behind Sands, but he didn't get called into this window. He wasn't a part of the group, and so he can get himself back in. You assume it's a Euro-heavy team in September, and he gets that window in there, and I understand the versatility. I do think Reggie Cannon's in that conversation as well because he's shown he can play right back and center back, right center back and a back three, whatever it is. And so I think he enters that convo with Palmer, Brown, and Sands. And then Paredes is, I guess we can all have dreams about something,
So who's the dream at left back?
For me, and I said it before this window, it was Sam Vines. He is like for like with Jedi. He is playing week in and week out in Europe. He is older. He's physically more experienced.
The very argument you just used against James Sands applies to Sam Vines, who plays at a worse club.
Except that Sands is in a conversation positionally against people who were in this camp. You picked someone who wasn't in this camp. So now Kevin Paredes is jumping from outside the camp to back in. If he's a starter in the Bundesliga, you're right. Kevin Paredes will be going to the World Cup.
Charlie, any thoughts here? This is just a little tiny taste right now of what will happen when the actual roster drops, both in September as well as ahead of the World Cup in November. A lot of emotions, a lot of stakes for not just the players, the coaches, but it seems supporters and fans and media as well. Charlie, quick thoughts, any?
Well, you look at Tyler Adams and Kellen Acosta, they both can play right back. So that hurts Reggie Cannon, because if you're talking about in a pinch, Serginho Dest can play left back. So he's ultimately your backup left back. And I would say both Tyler Adams and Acosta are your third right back behind Yedlin. So I think it's Dest and Yedlin as your top two right backs. I think in midfield and your wingers is where you really want the depth and probably center back for protection. But you also, like Doyle said, you have to plan for these emergencies. And if Anthony Robinson went down, who is your answer there?
Kevin Paredes.
And I think it's just Serginho Dest has to move to your left side, but he doesn't give you the same type of service that an Anthony Robinson does or play a similar style. And we saw Christian Pulisic and him, maybe not the best of relationships. They'd often get into the same space because they both come in on their right foot. So, you have to think about, where can you really add some guys? And I think in the midfield and in the winger positions in particular is where you're going to see some of those guys. So unfortunately, players like Joe Scally, Reggie Cannon, probably are not going to be involved in the final group.
If it was up to me, we'd all go. Everybody gets a spot on the plane.
Let's go!
Come on, we're
Wiebe loves the list.
Party, man. How could you leave anybody out? But we might have to. Greg might have to. Doyle, if you had to cut 3 off this from Berhalter's perspective, let's just say it's going to be the 23-man roster we've known for years and years and years, and all the rumors out of IFAB that it's going to 26 are false, though I hope that's not true. Who would be the last 3 in on this 26?
I had it as Pepe was 24, Sands was 25, and Christian Roldan was 26. So if it goes down to 23, only going to bring 2 true center forwards, only going to bring 4 true wingers, only going to bring 4 true center backs, and keep your fingers crossed for good health and no red cards, man.
Did we mention Jordan Morris in this conversation?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, there is probably a better chance that instead of bringing 3 true center forwards, Berhalter will bring 2 and then add Jordan Morris because he has the versatility in theory to play as a center forward as well, which is all the more interesting given that the U.S. played kind of a 3-5-2 in the second half against El Salvador. So, like, Berhalter's been willing to look at different tactical setups, different formations, all of it. And Morris is obviously a guy who he's trusted for a long time.
This conversation will not slow down, but ultimately the final decision is one man's with the support of his coaching staff. That is Greg Berhalter. Speaking of Greg Berhalter, let's debut our segment here. What Greg said. Matt Doyle has more on the shift in the tactics and the shape of the U.S. midfield in this June camp.
So tactically, the big takeaway from this camp was Greg Berhalter was willing to go back to the double pivot, which is something we've really not seen a lot of from the U.S. since about 2019. It was a single pivot basically through the entirety of World Cup qualifying and most of the Gold Cup and Nations League before that as well. And the reason for this change, according to John Champion and Taylor Twellman of ESPN, who talked about it on the Grenada broadcast, is Tyler Adams. And Berhalter said that in some sense, there were occasions where Tyler Adams did not get the job done in a single pivot role, specifically with regards to ball progression. It's just not his strong suit. So by switching to a double pivot, you drop Yunus Musah deeper, you get him on the ball earlier in sequences, you give him more chance to cut guys out of the play. And of course, he did that really well throughout camp. That is the advantage of the double pivot. But the other advantage is that it frees Tyler Adams up to be more of a two-way destroyer rather than a pure backline protector. And that's what we saw against Morocco. And specifically in this play, he pushes way up. We basically did not see this from Tyler Adams throughout qualifying. But part of him pushing up is the other guys on the field have to read the pressing triggers. And in this instance, Christian Pulisic doesn't. He doesn't get any pressure to the ball over here. And that allows for a big right to left switch. And suddenly for Morocco, it's on. Okay, but with the double pivot, you have another central midfielder back there. And that's the advantage of it. Cover for the guy who goes up to press. You just slide over, except Yunus Musah doesn't read it. He needs to come and slide over to the middle here to prevent this exact cutback that happens. Snuff that shot out before it can even be taken. He is 20 yards away from the play, so that forces a very nice save out of Matt Turner. So I completely understand why Greg Berhalter wanted to see it. It makes a lot of sense on paper, but in terms of execution on the field, very much a work in progress.
All right, a lot to digest ahead of September and, of course, ahead of November, Qatar 2022. Just months away. What are we watching in the next few months? What's the most important thing on our minds? Charlie, I'll start with you. Take your pick, man. What are you going to be paying close attention to as the calendar turns here?
I'm going to be paying attention to playing time for players who play in the attacking third for the U.S. Women's National Team. So, you look at Conrad De La Fuente, who's on the outside looking in, Richie Ledesma, but in particular, Ricardo Pepi. That's who I'm going to have my eyes on for these next couple of months.
Not been a successful starting run for him at Augsburg in the Bundesliga. They did stay up, but Ricardo Pepi has not scored a goal in many, many months now. Can he get on the field? Can he put the ball in the back of the net? Big question mark. Was a big part of qualifying at times for the U.S. Dave, what are you watching?
Well, for Canada, it starts, it ends the way it started in this conversation on this show, which is off the field, on the field. On the field, you're looking similar, as Charlie said, to some of the big players. What can they do at their club? The big one is Steven Eustachio to me. He is central. He is maybe the second or third best player on this team. He did make his move to FC Porto permanent. He was not a starter while he was at Porto on loan in the close of this season. So can he earn that spot and get himself in a good place for playing off the field? It's still in negotiations between the players in the CSA. The women's national team has a game coming up against South Korea in Toronto. So that's their first chance to work under the CSA since this all came to a head before the Panama game on the men's side. And it feels like what we've heard is that professionals have been brought in on the player side to represent them and get them over the line. The players didn't want to talk about it really after they got back into training heading into the Curacao game. So fingers crossed that all goes the way it should be and that this team can really focus on playing, because the CSA has organized 2 more friendlies in September. They got to get this team to Europe. They have to get them to Qatar and get them prepared, and you want to have every advantage you can going into this World Cup.
One word. Complicated. We'll see how it all plays out for Canada. One word for the health of Gio Reyna. Also complicated. Seems like he's getting back to speed. Seems like the rest has done him well. We saw images of him training around the U.S. national team in Austin. Of course, his father Claudio working for Austin FC. So a good place for him to land and have a little privacy and some time to get back on the ball, get his body right. But he could very well be the most influential player, influential attacking player, fill-in-the-blank player for the U.S. at the World Cup at Qatar. But will we see him healthy and in form to do it? That is the big question. Want to see him on the field at Dortmund, want to see him scoring goals, smiling, having a good time, progressing in his career, playing in the World Cup. So best wishes to Gio Reyna as he preps and gets his body right for this critical stretch for him in his career. Doyle, finish us off, man. What are you watching?
Well, honestly, I think you and Charlie have it right. It's injuries to not just Gio Reyna, but to everybody, because there's no Iron Man on this team. We see basically every player on this roster miss time. So injuries is one, and goals from the entire goals and minutes from the entire attack. However, whether it's guys who are written in pen, right, or guys like Brandon Vasquez. But after the Kevin Paredes propaganda I just threw out in the last segment, I basically staked my career on this kid. So if he doesn't break out and make this roster, I'm going to be despondent. I will be like Charlie and just start rooting for England. Charlie's a closet England fan, guys. You guys should know that.
If you didn't know that, you will find out in the coming months. Thank you so much for tuning in to the first edition here of Club and Country Qatar 2022. We'll be back every single month to do an in-depth breakdown on the U.S. and Canada. So we'll be back in July and August, then into September, previewing the friendlies, the final opportunities for Greg Berhalter and John Herdman to assess their squads, to get those guys together, and then, of course, all the way through the World Cup. If you missed the watch-alongs on YouTube Live and Twitch during this June window, shame on you. Get that second window up. We'll be back doing those in September, and then into the World Cup with special guests with expertise, telling stories, laughing, reacting, being nervous, nibbling our fingernails, cursing, throwing things at the wall, whatever we need to do to deal with what comes in November in Qatar. Big thanks to you guys, Charlie, Doyle, Goss, to our producer, Anders Arhus. I'm Andrew Wiebe. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you in July.